Shalom, family. Good to see you all here. Hope you're doing well. Well, it seems like the Three Eye Atlas is still lingering in the solar system. It didn't leave. Now, they're still talking about, oh, it's going to do a flyby Jupiter and then leave the solar system. But at the same time, they're talking about all these different things that it's doing and continue to do to this very day. So, just my observation, they really don't know what Three Eye Atlas is gonna do. They don't know. They're just going on the fact that the other 2 left the solar system, but the other 2 prior to Three Eye Atlas were not acting the same, and they were much smaller in size, okay? And this one is much larger. We have seen it change colors. We have seen it do things, speed up and slow down and then speed up again. And it got around the sun and got brighter and stronger. So it didn't break apart like a lot of comets would, because, it's just nothing but space dust and ice. So once it gets around that hot sun, many of them don't survive. They break up and just completely disintegrate. Well, that did not happen when Three Eye Atlas went near the sun. They talked about it was bluer than the sun, and it got brighter. So it was almost like it anchored some type of energy from the sun. So it is still there. It's still in the solar system. It's still being watched, although it may not be spoken about as much, but they are definitely keeping an eye on this thing because they don't know what it is and they don't know what's going to happen. But it's definitely not behaving the same. It's still doing very different things each and every day. And you're going to hear this in the clips that I put together. So, ladies and gentlemen, oh hell yeah. If it is our heavenly Father, the chariot, the angels, no, these Gentiles will never in a million years figure out what he's doing or what he's going to do or whether they're going to leave the solar system or not. They don't have that information. They're just speculating. So, and they should be scared. All the evil, Charles, they did on this planet, they should be plenty scared. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. Please give me a 1 if you can see my screen. Thank you.
Ray just captured something at 12:30 this morning that's breaking my brain. I'm not exaggerating. I've been looking at these images for hours, trying to figure out what the hell is happening because this object from another star system just did something that shouldn't be possible. And I'm not talking about some blurry nonsense that could be anything. I'm talking about documented, crystal clear evidence that Three Eye Atlas is changing right in front of our eyes in ways that make zero sense.
The Comet 3A Atlas came in around 12:30 in the midnight. So I had some time prior to that to use the telescope. So actually I moved the solar scope away from here. I was taking pictures of the sunspots and watching for the impact of the coronal holes on the Earth's atmosphere.
Look, you already know this thing was weird. We covered that. The contradictions, the impossible activation timing, the structure that doesn't exist in any comet catalog. But that was all leading up to this moment, to what Ray just captured while most people were asleep. The object flipped.
I moved the solar scope inside and I got in this other scope to take pictures of 3I. So I had some time before I go to the Comet 3 Atlas at 12:30. So I pointed the scope towards the north on two of the galaxies. They are M81 and 82. They are called like Cigar Galaxy and Boats Galaxy. And they are not fitting in my camera frame. They are a little bit sideways. So I wanted to get a good frame. So I went ahead and came back here and rotated the camera so that it can fit the frame perfectly. I took some beautiful pictures of those.
Completely changed its visual orientation between observation sessions. And before you think, okay, things move in space, so what? No, you don't understand. This isn't normal movement. This is geometric transformation that's happening way faster than it should.
It is going to fly. Because of the speed it is flying so fast, it's not going to get attracted by Jupiter. But we need to wait and see how that whole thing is going to get turned out. It's a very interesting comet to watch. I'll share the pictures that I took today. They are very interesting. It's looking really, really good. Picture I was talking about, this is the Boats Galaxy, and this is that Cigar Galaxy, and it's amazing. So this is just a 30 seconds on my telescope. It's beautiful.
Same telescope, same location, same processing techniques. Ray's been imaging this thing every single clear night since closest approach, obsessively. And for weeks, the structure was consistent.
And this is when we started capturing the data. Now the comet is going towards Jupiter, and you can clearly see how it is rotating. I can slow it down a little bit for you. There is
3I Atlas is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. And I just had an experience that shows me and proves to me that it is following its mission statement to the T. I was out just walking my dog, and a stranger comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, are you the alien guy, the alien Blues Clues guy?" And I laughed and I was like, "Yeah, that's me." He goes, "I follow you. So that thing, so it wasn't a mothership, it's not coming to Earth, right?" And he looked really concerned, and I go, "Oh, you're talking about 3I Atlas?" And he goes, "Yeah. So it wasn't a mothership, right? It's not coming." And I go, "Well, it is a mothership per se, but it was never intended to come to Earth, but it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do." So he goes, "I've just been going through so much, like I feel like everything is falling apart, but I'm trying to put it together. My anxiety is coming out of nowhere. I feel stressed, but I feel calm. I feel like something's changing, but I feel like not." And I knew exactly what he was feeling. He was going through a spiritual awakening, and I could see it. And he was just like, "I don't know what to do." So he goes, "Is there any way you can just give me some advice, or maybe just like 3 sentences to help me understand and feel what I'm feeling in this connection to this 3I Atlas?" And I said, "Self-awareness, collective consciousness, and spiritual awakening. And I need you to lean into those feelings that you're feeling right now, because that is 3I Atlas opening your eye. So lean into that." But the fact that me knowing that 3I Atlas's entire mission statement is to do all 3 of those things, and then to experience that in the wild with someone who needed to hear that and feel that. 3I Atlas is doing exactly what it's meant to do, and it's not a comet.
The story begins the way modern celestial surprises usually do, not with a lone astronomer at an eyepiece, but with software noticing that something in the background of the universe is moving wrong. A handful of images taken minutes apart, a point of light that shifts against the fixed stars, a detection pipeline that flags it, cross-checks it, and spits out an alert. At first, it is just another candidate among many, until the math starts to suggest a path that brushes far too close to home. Atlas, the system often associated with this kind of find, is built for speed and coverage. It favors wide swaths of sky and rapid cadence, because the first days after discovery matter more than people realize. When an object is first spotted, its orbit is not a clean line carved into certainty. It is a probability cloud. Astronomers are fitting a curve to a tiny arc of motion, trying to infer an entire solar orbit from a sliver of observed track. Early solutions can be dramatically wrong in either direction. An object can look harmless on day 1 and worrisome on day 2, or the opposite, because each new measurement can tug the best fit trajectory across millions of kilometers. That is why a collision narrative can ignite so quickly. In the earliest stage, the math genuinely can yield Earth-crossing possibilities even if the real object will ultimately miss by a comfortable margin. The moment an orbit solution includes even a narrow corridor of potential impact, the language around it changes. Words like nominal trajectory and uncertainty region and impact probability begin showing up in briefings. The public hears only the first half of that story and often misses the second half. That uncertainty is not hedging, it is the main plot. In the case implied by the title, what makes 3i Atlas feel different is not only the proximity problem, but the phrase NASA just revealed something is very wrong. In the real machinery of planetary defense, the phrase something is very wrong usually does not mean someone discovered a secret catastrophe and waited to tell everyone. It tends to mean the data is refusing to behave. The object's track does not fit a neat gravitational orbit. The residuals, the tiny differences between predicted positions and observed positions, do not shrink the way they should as more observations come in. The object might appear to accelerate slightly or drift off the path that pure gravity would dictate. That is the kind of wrong that keeps scientists awake because it complicates the one task everyone needs done first, knowing where it will be. There are several ways a small body can behave badly in orbit. Calculations without any conspiracy or melodrama. One of the biggest is outgassing. If the object is comet-like, warming as it approaches the sun, jets of gas and dust can act like thrusters, changing its course by a small but crucial amount. Another is the Yarkovsky effect, a subtle push caused by uneven heat re-radiation, which can slowly alter the orbit of a rotating asteroid. A third is fragmentation. If the object is a loose pile of rubble or an icy body cracking under thermal stress, it can shed material and effectively change its center of mass or create multiple pieces, each on slightly different paths. Even an error in the earliest astrometry, caused by a faint object near the detection limit or a background star catalog mismatch, can seed orbit fits with misleading confidence. Now fold those technical uncertainties into the emotional reality of the words collision course with Earth. The phrase sounds like a straight line aimed at a target. The actual situation is more like trying to predict the path of a tossed handful of sand in a gusty wind while you are still arguing over how hard it was thrown. NASA and its partner institutions do not work with a single yes or no narrative. They work with risk corridors, impact windows, probability distributions, and constant revision. The public wants a definitive statement because it feels safer. The science resists definitiveness because premature certainty is the most dangerous kind of error. If 3i Atlas is being labeled 3i, that designation carries its own loaded implication. The I suggests interstellar, an object not bound to the sun in the long term, on a hyperbolic trajectory that came from outside the solar system.
It started just after sunrise. Not everywhere, of course, but somewhere in the Pacific where morning crept over the horizon like it always does, quietly, softly, without ceremony. Above, the sky was still asleep. Blue hadn't yet pushed through the grey. And in a small corner of the world, a telescope, one that hadn't seen anything unusual for weeks, recorded a deviation so slight, so minor, that its software almost dismissed it. But it didn't. And that's where everything began to unravel. At 0613 UTC, December 21st, a new data point arrived. Clean, slight, off by less than a breath. And yet, it wasn't where it was supposed to be. 3 Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar object to ever enter our solar system, had shifted. Not by much. Just enough to make every orbital model tick red. Just enough to force recalibration of everything we thought we knew about its outbound path. You have to understand, for the last few weeks 3i Atlas had been stable. No wobble, no flare, no chatter. Just a soft light, gliding along a hyperbolic trajectory that would soon carry it safely away from our system. Safely. That was the word scientists like to use, because when something from beyond the stars enters our neighborhood, safe is comforting. Predictable is a promise. But this morning, the promise broke. The first report came from a mid-tier observatory in northern Japan. They thought it was a measurement error. But 2 hours later, confirmation came from Chile, then again from a private solar tracking array in Tenerife. All showed the same thing. 3i Atlas had changed course. Not much, but enough. It had drifted, ever so slightly, closer to Earth's line of sight, and that's when things got quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from peace, the kind that comes from delay, from waiting, from analysts double-checking data that didn't make sense. NASA didn't issue a statement. ESA redirected their orbital tracking assets without announcing why, and within minutes, the object that everyone had started to forget about was back in the center of attention. Because this wasn't a comet fragmenting. This wasn't debris tumbling through space. This was something whole, stable, moving, not randomly, but deliberately. And it wasn't following the model anymore. To understand the weight of this, you need to remember what Atlas is: interstellar. That's not just a poetic label. It means it came from another star system. It wasn't born from the frozen disk beyond Neptune. It didn't share a solar birthplace with Jupiter or Mars or Earth. It came from somewhere else, a place we can't name, and it was supposed to be leaving. When 3i Atlas rounded the...
I have something to show you. It's brand new. It just dropped. Space Tracker released a set of deep zoom images of 3i Atlas, and they are honestly very strange. Now, to start, these aren't single photos. They're 20-minute stacked exposures from an observer named Diego San Arojo. Hopefully I said that right. But Space Tracker stabilized the frames, zoomed in 4,000%. They removed noise, corrected color, and averaged everything together. When you stack frames over 20 minutes, you reveal structures that are completely invisible in a single snapshot. And what it shows is a 4-point star, basically star-shaped luminous core surrounded by kind of a plasma-like haze. The symmetry is unusual, and the biggest surprise is that there's no obvious tail direction in this averaged composite, even though we know that the object has both dust and ion jets. So here's where the conversation gets a little interesting, and I'm going to call this kind of the woo-woo section. But it's worth talking about because, well, you'll see why. Just last week, Medium published an article called 3i Atlas Complex Jet Structured Angles Revealed. And in it...
Look, I need to tell you something that just happened today. And honestly, it's the kind of update that makes you stop and realize we might be watching something truly unprecedented unfold in real time. NASA just changed the official status designation for this interstellar object. And I know that sounds bureaucratic and boring, but trust me when I say this is huge. This is their way of quietly telling the scientific community that what we're seeing is no longer business as usual. This isn't just a bright comet doing comet things anymore. Something is fundamentally changing with this object, and they can no longer pretend otherwise. So let me walk you through exactly what changed, why it matters, and what it might mean for where this whole story is headed. But before we continue, if this has your attention, you can subscribe, turn on notifications, and hit like anytime. And for the best viewing, switch to full screen and enjoy what's coming next. So, up until today, the official language around this visitor has been cautious but relatively calm. They described it as having a single nucleus, an active coma with some interesting features, measurable forces pushing it around that weren't purely gravitational, but nothing that screamed emergency. No confirmed fragmentation, no major structural concerns, just a weird interstellar comet doing its thing as it heads back out into deep space. That language just got rewritten. In the newest internal summaries that are circulating among the observation teams, this object is now officially flagged as a dynamically evolving, structurally stressed object, with moderate risk of future disruption. Now, I know that sounds like it was written by a committee of scientists trying to be as careful as possible with their words, and it absolutely was. But here's what that really translates to in plain language. The data has crossed a threshold. The numbers have gone past the point where they can keep calling this a normal, if unusual, comet that's just slowly winding down its activity as it moves away from the sun. Something else is happening here, and it's happening right now. So what actually triggered this change in status? What data points finally pushed them over the edge into admitting this thing is stressed and evolving? There are three main pieces, and they all came together over the past several days. Let me break them down one by one, because each one tells us something critical about what's going on inside this ancient visitor. The first trigger was the spin. For weeks now, astronomers around the world have been tracking tiny variations in how bright this object appears over time.
NASA just dropped another alert about 3I Atlas, and I need you to remember this because it's easy to miss. This time, the first warning didn't come from the images, it came from the orbit. And that's where things get uncomfortable, because when a comet's orbit starts talking back, it usually means something on the nucleus changed before our eyes even catch up. In a second, I'm going to show you why two totally separate teams using totally separate data ended up with the same conclusion. And once you see it, you'll understand why observatories are tightening their watch. But first, here's what happened overnight. A global network of tracking stations fed in a fresh batch of precise position measurements. Same telescopes, same target, same reduction pipeline. Nothing about the observing process changed. And yet, when those positions were plugged into the orbit solver, the fit started to break. Not violently, not dramatically, just enough to set off alarms in the math. The residuals went weird. If you've never heard that term, residuals are the tiny differences between where the model says 3I Atlas should be and where it actually appears in the sky. In a perfect world, residuals are zero. In the real world, they're always there. But they're supposed to be random, small, scattershot, like noise. That's not what happened. They aligned. They formed a pattern, and the whole pattern leaned in a new direction. That's the moment gravity stops being the whole story. Because if 3I Atlas were a dead rock, asteroid style, gravity would be enough. Sun pulls, planets tug. You predict the position precisely. But 3I Atlas is active. It vents gas. It throws dust. It runs jets. And every time material shoots out one way, the nucleus gets pushed the other way. That push is the non-gravitational force, a tiny rocket engine built out of sunlight and ice. And up until yesterday, we thought we had that engine pretty well characterized. Direction, known. Strength, roughly known. Orbit solutions, stable enough. Today, they weren't. To make the new observations fit, the solver had to tilt the non-gravitational push. Not a huge rotation, but big enough to matter. Big enough that the math refuses to close without it. So the first clue is this. The net thrust vector rotated. Now hold that thought, because here's where it gets eerie. While the orbit team was still arguing with the numbers, the imaging team finished processing a completely separate data set. No orbit fitting, no residuals, just stacked exposures from multiple observatories to build high-contrast views of the inner coma. And the images told the same story. Last week, the inner coma and the main jet looked stable, like a configuration you could trust. Like, okay, this is how it's venting right now. Today, it isn't. The inner coma, the bright fuzzy region close to the nucleus, is skewed differently. The brightest part of the glow moved, and the main jet, the dominant stream of material, tilted. It's leaning in a new direction compared to last week, but it doesn't stop there. Secondary features rebalance too, smaller fans, side streams. Even the tail picks up a subtle S-curve that wasn't there earlier, like the whole system twisted slightly. So now you have two independent lines of evidence. The orbit says the net force rotated. The images show the jets rotated with it. That's not a processing error. That's not coincidence. That's a physical change happening right now. And once you accept that, the real question becomes unavoidable. Why does this keep happening? Because whatever is driving these changes is inside the nucleus, and we can't see inside the nucleus. Not directly, we can only infer it from the way it pushes itself through space. So here's the core of it.
There were anomalies, yes, flashes near perihelion, strange polarization, non-gravitational accelerations that didn't match the usual outgassing models. But eventually, it passed its closest approach and began to drift away. The story was settling. The mystery was calming. We were ready to let it go, until this morning. What makes this deviation different? What makes it unsettling isn't the scale, it's the timing. Because objects don't just change course, not when they've already left the sun behind, not when the gravitational tides have already loosened their hold, not on a quiet morning, not after weeks of silence. This deviation looked clean, not like a burst of gas throwing off the center of mass. not like a fracture spewing dust, but like a pivot, a slow, almost imperceptible change in direction, exactly when Earth rotated into the line of view. Coincidence? That's the word you'll hear in interviews. An observational artifact, a transient fluctuation, minor error bands. But the telemetry doesn't lie. The object moved, and no one seems ready to explain how or why. All across the globe, the data stream lit up. Infrared instruments recalibrated. Orbital projections began adjusting mid-simulation. Radio observatories pointed at the sky, searching for signal drift. And somewhere, we can't say exactly where, high-resolution military arrays quietly requested archived footage of the region. Because when something interstellar moves against prediction, you don't just track it, you watch it, you listen to it, you try to understand what it's responding to. Later that morning, a faint signature was detected, not from the object itself, but from the region it had crossed. A polarized reflection, just a flicker, but one that didn't match sunlight scattering off dust. It was sharp, specular, like light bouncing from a surface, not a gas cloud. And here, once again, the story bends. Because now the question isn't just why 3I Atlas shifted, it's how. Was it outgassing? There's no jet signature. Was it an internal explosion? No fragments. Was it gravitational? There's nothing near enough. So what's left? The answer is simple. Too simple. It moved, and we don't know what made it move. Back in the control room of a telescope in New Mexico, someone whispered the same sentence people have been trying to avoid since October. It didn't react. It responded. That word, responded, changes everything. Because reaction is random, natural, but response
rapidly through space. They were filtered based on sky position, removing anything not precisely aligned with 3I Atlas. Doppler motion was accounted for, ensuring that only signals tracking the object's velocity remained. After all of that filtering, only 211 candidate signals survived. Each of those was examined manually. Every single one was traced back to terrestrial interference. No repeating patterns were found. No artificial structure. No beacon. No modulation that could not be explained by human technology. The conclusion was straightforward. No radio signal was detected from 3I Atlas, and that absence is not meaningless. From the lack of detection, scientists were able to calculate strict upper limits on how much radio power the object could possibly be emitting. If it were transmitting in those frequency bands, its output would have to be weaker than a common household light bulb. Subsequent observations by the Green Bank telescope, which scanned an even broader frequency range, pushed that limit down further still to fractions of a watt. By the standards of technosignature searches, this is profound silence. It does not prove that 3I Atlas is natural. That was never the goal. What it does rule out is something very specific, an active, intentional transmitter. If the object is artificial, it is not broadcasting. It is not advertising its presence. It is not leaking detectable power. In short, it is not talking to us. But the radio silence is only half the story. Toward a visitor from another star system, and the universe did not answer. But silence is not a solution. It is a boundary, one we have now measured. 3I Atlas continues its journey, outbound, quiet, anomalous, and unresolved. It has already taught us that interstellar objects can be stranger than expected, that our models are incomplete, and that the space between stars still holds surprises. The next visitor may cross a different boundary. Until then, we watch.
Well, they're not going to figure this thing out, y'all. It's going to always be this type of reporting and speculating because they're never going to 100% figure this thing out. You know, number one, they never seen it before. and they really can't measure it up against anything that they've seen in the past or actual comets, because we know it's not a comet. So it's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. And already there's a lot of people putting videos out. Some people are still saying they don't think it's going to leave the solar system. It's actually going to stay in the solar system. And then you still got people thinking once it gets past Jupiter, it's going to leave the solar system. But we shall see. We shall see. You know? All I know is it's funny listening to them every day, because they really don't know what to say about this other than they never seen anything like it before. But hey, I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to all play out over the next few weeks. But don't be surprised in 2026 if that thing is still in our solar system. Don't be surprised. So, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and conclude. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll definitely come back together tomorrow on different topics. Have a wonderful night, and shalom. And somebody was asking me, by the way, about the butter. The butter will be relisted tonight, and there's still edge growth butter out there as well. But, so you'll just have to use the thank you 10 to get 10% off of your purchase. So everybody enjoy your night. Shalom, family.